In the rolling hills of rural Pennsylvania, where generations of farmers have worked the land without question, something extraordinary is about to surface. James Miller has spent 40 years tending to his family's ancestral farm, never suspecting that beneath his fields lies a secret that would shake the foundation of his quiet community. When a mysterious stray dog appears on his property, persistently leading him to a specific spot in his south pasture, James discovers an ancient door sealed into the earth itself. What he finds behind that weathered entrance will unravel too. Centuries of carefully guarded secrets, exposing a truth that powerful people have died to protect. This isn't just about what's behind the door. It's about why someone went to such lengths to hide it. What dark chapter of history lies buried beneath this peaceful farmland, and why did this stray dog choose today to reveal it? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn crept over the Miller farm like it had 10,000 times before, painting the old red barn in shades of amber and gold. James Miller had been up since 4, moving through his morning routine with the precision of a man who'd measured his life in sunrises. Coffee first, black and strong enough to stand a spoon in, then the equipment checks, followed by feeding the livestock. At 62, James felt every step of the worn path between the farmhouse and the barn. But he wouldn't have it any other way. The arthritis in his knees might slow him down, but it couldn't stop him. This land had been in his family for 4 generations, and he intended to keep it that way. The morning fog hung thick over the south pasture, unusual for September. James paused on his way to check the fence line, something about the mist setting him on edge. That's when he heard it, a soft whine, followed by the padding of paws through wet grass. The dog emerged from the fog like a ghost. German Shepherd, maybe, or some mix thereof. But its bearing wasn't that of a typical stray. Despite its weathered appearance, there was an intelligence in its amber eyes that gave James pause. Around its neck hung a worn leather collar, the metal tag so corroded it was impossible to read. "Well now," James said, keeping his voice gentle, "where'd you come from?" The dog sat, regarding him with an almost human intensity. Then it stood, took 3 steps toward the middle of the pasture, and looked back at him expectantly. James shook his head. "Got work to do, boy. Can't be following strange dogs around my own property." He turned back toward the fence line, but a sharp bark stopped him. The dog had moved closer to him now, its posture urgent. Again it moved toward the center of the field, and again it looked back. "Persistent fella, aren't you?" James reached into his pocket, pulling out his grandfather's journal, a small, leather-bound book he'd taken to carrying ever since finding it in the attic last spring. He'd been meaning to read it properly, but something about its contents always seemed to slip away from him. Now, watching the dog, he found himself thumbing through the yellowed pages. A passage caught his eye, the faded ink barely legible. The old ones spoke of tunnels beneath the fields, passages that ran deeper than any route. Sarah Chen's grandfather used to tell stories about them at the general store, but folks just laughed. Still, there are things in this earth that don't sleep, and secrets that need keeping. The dog barked again, pulling James from the page. When he looked up, the animal was pawing at the ground about 50 yards out, right where the pasture began. "To slope, all right," James sighed, tucking the journal away. "Let's see what's got you so worked up." He crossed the field, morning dew soaking through his work boots. The fog had begun to lift, but there was still something strange about the air, a heaviness that had nothing to do with moisture. The dog's excitement grew as James approached. It circled a patch of ground roughly 6 feet in diameter, where the grass grew slightly thinner than the surrounding area. James might never have noticed it on his own, but now that he was looking, he prodded the ground with his boot and heard a hollow sound that didn't belong in a field of packed earth. Kneeling down, he brushed aside some of the grass. Something metallic glinted in the strengthening sunlight. The dog whined softly and pressed its nose against James's hand, as if offering encouragement. Heart beating faster now, James pulled more grass away, revealing what appeared to be the edge of something large and circular embedded in the ground. What in God's name? He stood quickly, suddenly aware of how exposed he felt in the middle of his own field. The morning's familiar routine had vanished, replaced by something older and stranger. The dog sat beside him, its mission apparently accomplished, watching to see what he would do next. James pulled out his grandfather's journal again, this time paying closer attention to the words that had always seemed to fade from memory. Some doors aren't meant to be found until the right time comes. Some secrets keep themselves, waiting for the proper guardian. The dog's tail thumped once against the ground, and James knew with sudden certainty that his quiet life on the Miller farm was about to change forever. James stood in his tool shed, gathering what he needed with trembling hands. The morning's discovery had left him rattled, but years of practical farm work steadied him. Whatever lay beneath his field, he'd approach it methodically. The dog waited, by the shed door, watching his every move. It hadn't left his side since the discovery, as if ensuring he wouldn't back out now. "Don't suppose you want to tell me what we're getting into?" James asked. The dog's tail wagged once, but offered no other insights. He loaded supplies into his wheelbarrow, shovels, rope, his old surveyor's level from his construction days, and a pair of work lights he normally used for nighttime equipment repairs. After a moment's thought, he added his grandfather's journal and a thermos of coffee. The metallic circle was exactly where they'd left it, glinting dully in the late morning sun. James set up his equipment, then began carefully removing the soil around the edge. The dog settled nearby, alert but patient. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, and James's shirt grew dark with sweat. As he cleared more earth away, patterns emerged in the metal, intricate scrollwork and symbols that looked almost like writing, but in no language he recognized. "This isn't some old septic tank," he muttered, tracing one of the symbols with a dirt-stained finger. The dog whined in agreement. By mid-afternoon, James had exposed most of what appeared to be a massive circular door, roughly 8 feet in diameter. Its surface was covered in concentric rings of symbols, all converging on a central mechanism that looked deceptively like an ordinary lock. He was examining the lock when his shovel hit something solid near the door's edge. Careful digging revealed a small metal box. Its bronze surface turned green with age. The dog's ears perked up, and it moved closer to watch as James worked the corroded latch. Inside lay a ring of keys, each one unique and marked with symbols, matching those on the door. The metal was the same strange bronze as the box, but these showed no signs of corrosion. They looked as pristine as the day they were made. "Now we're getting somewhere," James said, selecting a key that matched the central lock's pattern. The dog stood, tail wagging with renewed energy. The key slid in smoothly, as if the lock had been oiled yesterday, instead of lying buried for God knew how long. James held his breath and turned it. Something deep beneath the earth clicked and groaned. The sound of ancient machinery, long dormant but still functional, echoed up through the soil. The dog backed away as the door's surface began to shift, rings of metal rotating and realigning themselves like some massive combination lock. James stumbled back, watching in disbelief as the door slowly began to sink and slide to one side, revealing a perfectly circular shaft descending into darkness. The air that rose from the opening was cool and dry, carrying a faint metallic scent. Stone steps, worn but solid, spiraled down along the shaft's wall. Mounted at regular intervals were what looked like old gas lamps, their brass fixtures tarnished but intact. Most surprisingly, a modern-looking junction box was mounted just inside the entrance, with a switch that looked much newer than its surroundings. James's hand shook as he flipped the switch. One by one, the lamps flickered to life, electric bulbs, hidden behind antique glass, casting a warm glow down into the depths. "Someone's been maintaining this," he said softly. The dog nudged his hand, pushing the ring of keys against his palm as if reminding him of their importance. James pulled out his grandfather's journal again, frantically searching for any mention of this underground structure. Near the back, he found a loose page covered in hastily scrawled notes. The keys are the legacy. Each guardian passes them on, keeping the old ways alive. The doors must stay sealed until needed. God help us if the wrong people find what lies. Below, the dog sat at the top of the stairs, looking expectantly at James. The keys felt heavy in his hand, each one a question waiting to be answered. Last chance to back out, he told himself, but he already knew he wouldn't. 4 generations of millers had worked this land, and apparently they'd been guarding more than just crops. Taking a deep breath, James clicked on one of his work lights and started down the stairs, the dog following close behind. The door sealed itself as they descended, leaving only the warm glow of the ancient lamps to light their way into whatever secrets lay beneath the Miller farm. The stairs descended in a perfect spiral, each step worn smooth by countless feet that had come before. James counted them out of habit, 37 steps before the stairwell opened into a circular chamber that took his breath away. The room was perhaps 30 feet in diameter, its walls lined with what looked like copper panels, covered in more of those strange symbols. Unlike the weathered door above, these surfaces gleamed as if they'd been polished yesterday. James's work light caught each one, sending reflections dancing across the curved ceiling. "This isn't possible," he whispered, the dog padding alongside. Him offered no argument, but its posture had changed. Gone was the urgent excitement from above. Now it moved with purpose, like a guard making its rounds. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal of dark stone, its surface inlaid with brass, fittings that matched the designs from the door above. Atop it lay a leather-bound book, its pages yellow with age but intact. James approached carefully, conscious of every echo his boots made on the stone floor. The book's cover bore no title, just a single symbol matching one from his ring of keys. When he opened it, the spine crackled but held. "August 15th, 1872, he read aloud. "First inspection of the lower chambers complete. All seals remain intact. The Society's treasures are secure, though I fear—" He squinted at the faded ink. "Though I fear our time of testing approaches." The dog's sudden growl made him jump. It was staring intently at a dark alcove James hadn't noticed before. Training his light there revealed a modern security camera, its red LED blinking steadily. "Jesus," James muttered, quickly closing the book. Someone still watching, as if in response. A low hum filled the chamber, hidden fans whirred to life, circulating the stale air. In the walls, something that sounded like old pipes shuddered and clanked. The dog nudged him toward another alcove, this one containing a partially collapsed shelf of documents. Among the scattered papers, a piece of stone caught his eye. A fragment of what looked like a map, carved into pale granite. James lifted it carefully. The stone was covered in a network of lines and symbols with small notations, in the same strange script he'd seen above. But in one corner, someone had added notes in English. Lower levels marked in red. Danger. Do not proceed without full authorization. Emergency exits marked with crossed keys. A series of dates followed, the most recent from just 3 months ago. "This isn't some abandoned bunker," James said, realization dawning. "This is still active, still in use." The dog's tail wagged once in confirmation. Movement from the security camera drew his attention. It had turned to focus directly on him. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the distinctive sound of a heavy door opening. The dog's ears perked up, and it moved quickly to James's side, pressing against his leg in what felt like a protective gesture. From one of the 3 corridors leading out of the chamber came the echo of footsteps. James looked frantically around the room, counting exits. The passage they'd come down, now seeming very far away. 2 more corridors, both marked with symbols that matched keys on his ring. The footsteps grew closer. The dog tugged at his pants leg, pulling him toward the rightmost corridor. The stone fragment in his hands seemed to grow heavier as he realized he'd have to make a choice: retreat back to the surface and try to forget what he'd found, or commit to going deeper. The footsteps echoed again, closer now, official sounding. Voices murmured just out of earshot. The dog pulled more insistently at his leg. James tucked the stone fragment into his jacket pocket alongside his grandfather's journal. The weight of both seemed to ground him, connecting him to whatever legacy had been passed down through his family's quiet stewardship of this land. "All right," he whispered to the dog. "Lead the way." They slipped into the right corridor just as lights began to flood the main chamber. James caught a glimpse of flashlight beams and dark uniforms before they rounded a corner and descended deeper into the Earth's mysteries. Behind them, urgent voices echoed off stone walls. "Check the seals, secure the perimeter, find out who accessed." But James and his unusual guide were already moving quietly through the darkness, the ring of keys, blinking softly with each step toward whatever truth lay waiting in the depths below the Miller farm. Eerily calm, despite everything they'd witnessed, the stone fragment felt heavy in his jacket pocket as he climbed the museum's worn steps. Sarah Chen would be inside, as she had been every Tuesday for the past 30 years. If anyone could make sense of what he'd found, it would be her. The museum's bell chimed as he entered. Sarah looked up from her desk, silver-streaked hair pulled back in her usual neat bun. Her eyes widened at the sight of the dog padding in behind him. "James Miller," she said, adjusting her reading glasses. "Twice in 1 month. The world must be ending." "Sarah," he managed, his voice rougher than he'd expected, "I need to show you something." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded at the dog. "New friend?" "Sort of found me." James glanced around the empty museum. "Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Sarah's expression grew serious. She stood, pulling a ring of keys from her drawer. "Come to the archives." The archive room smelled of old paper and leather, its walls lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves. Sarah locked the door behind them and drew the blinds. "Show me," she said simply. James placed the stone fragment on her desk. Sarah's sharp intake of breath told him she recognized something about it. "Where did you find this?" Her voice had dropped to a whisper. "You might want to sit down for that part." He told her everything: the dog, the door, the underground chamber. As he spoke, Sarah's face grew increasingly pale. When he finished, she walked to a locked cabinet in the corner. "I always wondered if it was more than legend," she said, removing a large leather-bound book. "My grandfather used to tell stories about secret meetings, underground chambers where powerful men made decisions that shaped history. Everyone thought he was just an old man with an active imagination." She placed the book on her desk beside the stone fragment. The ledger's cover bore the same symbols James had seen underground. This belonged to Howard Chen, my great-grandfather. He was the Society's record keeper from 1872 to 1893. She opened it carefully, revealing pages of meticulous handwriting. "I could never decode his entries, but look," she pointed to a symbol in the margin. "It matches your stone." James leaned closer. The ledger detailed meetings, attendance records, and what appeared to be coded messages. One entry caught his eye: Miller's farm secured as northern access point, guardianship accepted, blood oath sworn. Blood oath? James felt a chill despite the room's warmth. Sarah flipped through more pages. The Society was real, James. They called themselves the Guardians of the Gate. During the Civil War, they used the tunnels to move information, people, supplies. But that wasn't their primary purpose. What was? They were protecting something they thought could change the course of history if it fell into the wrong hands. She tapped another entry. Here, the artifact remains secure. Its power must never be unleashed upon an unprepared world. The dog, which had been sitting quietly by the door, suddenly growled. Outside, a car door slammed. Sarah moved to the window and carefully peered out. "Black SUV," she said tensely. "Two men in suits. James, how did you get here without being followed?" "I took back roads, stayed off the main—" He stopped as realization hit. "The camera. In the chamber. They saw me." Listened carefully. Sarah quickly copied several pages from the ledger. "Take these. There's a back door through the restoration room. Go home, pack whatever you need, and disappear for a while. I can't just... Your grandfather did the same thing in 73. 2 weeks, he was gone. Then everything quieted down." She pressed the copied pages into his hands. "The society still exists, James. They're still watching. But now they know you found the door, and they'll want to know how much you've learned." Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. The dog's growl deepened. "Go," Sarah whispered. "I'll stall them, and James—" She gripped his arm. "Trust the dog. It's no accident it found you." James slipped out through the restoration room, the copied pages tucked safely away with the stone fragment. As he eased his truck onto a back street, he saw the two men entering the museum. The dog sat alert beside him, watching the road ahead. On the seat between them, the ring of keys seemed to grow warmer, as if responding to some unseen signal from the earth below. James turned onto the old logging road that would take him home by the long way. The last time a miller had disappeared, it was to protect whatever lay beneath that door. Now it was his turn to become part of that legacy, whether he was ready or not. The logging road twisted through dense forest, branches scraping against the truck's sides. James kept checking his rearview mirror, though the dog's calm demeanor suggested they weren't being followed. Not yet, anyway. When he finally pulled into his farmyard, the sun was setting. Everything looked exactly as he'd left it. Tools by the shed, tractor parked under the oak tree, fields stretching quiet and empty to the horizon. But something felt different. Wrong. The dog jumped out first, hackles raised. James followed more. Slowly, the weight of the keys, stone fragment and copied ledger pages, making his jacket pockets sag. His front door was unlocked. He was certain he'd locked it. Inside, nothing was obviously disturbed, but small details jumped out at him. A chair slightly askew. His morning coffee cup moved to the wrong side of the sink, the curtain gap wider than he always kept it. "They've been here," he muttered. The dog sniffed the air and growled softly in agreement. On his kitchen table lay a manila envelope that hadn't been there that morning. No address, no markings, just his name in precise black letters, James Miller. The dog watched intently as James opened it. Inside were dozens of photographs, all of his farm. Aerial shots showing the exact location of the underground door, images of him walking his fields, checking fences, talking to neighbors. Some dated back months. The final photo showed him entering the Historical Society building less than 2 hours ago. A note was paperclipped to the photos. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Your farm." James sank into a kitchen chair, photos scattered before him. They've been watching all along, waiting for someone to find it. The dog nudged his hand, drawing his attention to something he'd missed, a photo that had slipped under the others. It showed his grandfather, dated 1973, standing in what looked like the same underground chamber James had discovered. He was younger than James had ever known him, but his expression was unmistakable. Determination mixed with fear. The back of the photo bore a handwritten note, "Like grandfather, like grandson. Choose wisely." A sharp rap at the window made James jump. Sheriff Tom Mackenzie stood outside, gesturing to be let in. The dog's growl deepened. James had known Tom since Hyde school, trusted him as much as anyone in town, but Sarah's warnings echoed in his mind. The society still exists. They're still watching. He opened the door cautiously. "Evening, Tom." James. The sheriff's usually friendly face was tight with concern. "Mind if I come in? Got some questions?" "About unusual activity reported near your south pasture." The dog positioned itself between them, silent but alert. "Actually, I was just heading out," James said. "Equipment problems over at the Weber place. They need help before dark." "This won't take long." Tom's hand rested casually near his holster. "Just a few questions about visitors you might have had. People asking about the property." James thought of the underground chamber, the cameras, the men in suits at the Historical Society. How deep did this go? Who could he trust? "Tell you what," he said, forcing a casual tone. "Come by tomorrow." "Morning. I've got a meeting at 9, but after that—" "A meeting?" Tom's eyes narrowed slightly. "With whom?" Before James could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Don't trust anyone. They have people everywhere." "Just the bank," James lied. "Refinancing discussions. You know how it is." Tom studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Tomorrow, then, after your meeting." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and James? Be careful with local history. Some stories are better left buried." James waited until the sheriff's car disappeared. Down the drive before closing the door. His hands were shaking as he gathered the scattered photos. The dog watched him with those two intelligent eyes, then walked to the back door and whined. "You're right," James said. "We can't stay here." He moved quickly, gathering essentials into an old duffel bag. The photos went into his grandfather's journal, along with Sarah's copied pages. Whatever he was involved in now, whatever his grandfather had protected, it was bigger than just his farm. As darkness fell, James Miller took one last look at his family's land. Tomorrow, people would come looking for answers about what lay beneath his fields. But by then, he'd be long gone, following his grandfather's footsteps into a mystery that had waited generations to be uncovered. James drove through the night, taking back roads he hadn't used since high school. The dog dozed beside him, occasionally lifting its head to sniff the air or study passing headlights. They stopped only once, at an all-night diner 50 miles. From home, where James used the payphone to call Sarah. "The tunnels," she said without preamble. "They don't just connect to your farm, they're everywhere, under the whole county, maybe further." "How do you know?" "Because I'm looking at Howard. Chen's personal journal right now." "James, that stone fragment you found? It's part of something bigger, much bigger." Back in the truck, James studied the fragment by flashlight. The network of lines he'd thought were random now seemed to form a pattern, like veins spreading out from a central point. "We need to go back," he told the dog. "Not home, somewhere else, another entrance." The dog's tail thumped against the seat. They arrived at Willow Creek Cemetery just before dawn. Sarah's notes had mentioned something about the old Chen family mausoleum, and James had a hunch. The mausoleum stood on a small hill, its marble facade green with age. The dog led him straight to it, nose working the air. Around back, behind a growth of ivy, James found what he was looking for, the same symbols that had marked the door in his field. This lock was different, but one of his keys fit perfectly. The door opened with a whisper of well-oiled hinges. Inside, past the formal burial chamber, a hidden stairwell led down. Modern emergency lights cast a pale glow on the steps. Somewhere below, James heard the hum of ventilation systems. "They've been maintaining all of it," he muttered, "right under our noses." The stairs opened into a tunnel intersection. 3 passages branched off, each marked with different symbols. On a pedestal at the center sat an odd device, like a compass, but far more complex. Its brass surface was etched with concentric circles matching the patterns from the underground door. A note beside it read, "For authorized navigators only." James lifted the device carefully. As soon as he touched it, the circles began to rotate, settling into a new configuration. An arrow pointed decisively down one of the tunnels. "Mason's compass," he breathed, remembering a reference from the ledger. "They use these to navigate the network." The dog was already heading down the indicated tunnel, its movements certain. James followed, counting his steps and noting the subtle changes in the walls. Modern security cameras mixed with Victorian-era gas fittings, new electrical conduits ran alongside old steam pipes. They walked for what felt like hours. The compass periodically realigned itself, guiding them through a maze of intersections. James mapped their route in his notebook, adding to the fragment's pattern. It's not just tunnels, he realized. It's a giant circuit, like a computer made of underground passages. The dog stopped suddenly, ears perked. From somewhere ahead came the sound of voices, growing closer. James clicked off his light and pressed against the wall. The compass in his hand grew warm, its arrows spinning wildly. As the voices approached, he made out fragments of conversation, signals getting stronger. Chen family thinks they can still control access. Miller Farm compromise. Change is everything. The speakers passed through an intersection ahead, flashlight beams bouncing off the walls. James caught glimpses of tactical gear and sophisticated equipment. When they were gone, the dog led him to the junction they'd used. A modern electronic keypad had been installed beside a heavy steel door. Above it, barely visible, were the worn remains of an original marble plaque. Central repository. Authorized personnel, only the truth lies below. The compass pointed directly at the door, all its circles locked into a single pattern. But the keypad required a code James didn't have. Not yet, he whispered to the dog. We need to understand more first. They retraced their steps, James adding to his map with each turn. By the time they emerged into the pre-dawn light, he had confirmed one thing. The network was vast, active, and far more sophisticated than a simple escape route or storage system. Whatever the Guardians had been protecting, it was still down there, still drawing people to it, still waiting to be found. And now James had one of their compasses to help him find it. Sunrise found James parked outside Millbrook's oldest nursing home, Cedar Grove. The dog sat alert in the passenger seat, watching an elderly man in a wheelchair on the facility's front porch. Harold Weber, 93 years old, former town telegrapher, and according to Sarah's notes, the last person to communicate with James's grandfather before his 2-week disappearance in 1973. Ready? James asked the dog. Its tail wagged once in response. Harold's eyes were cloudy with cataracts, but his mind was sharp as ever. He smiled as James approached. Miller boy, he said. Wondered when you'd come asking. You been expecting me? Saw the signs. Just like 73. Black cars in town, strangers asking questions, and now you, looking just like your grandfather did that morning. The dog settled at Harold's feet, as if they were old friends. The old man's gnarled hands trembled slightly as he reached into his robe. Been keeping this safe, he said, withdrawing a small, leather-bound book. Your grandfather left it with me. Said if another Miller ever came asking questions, I should hand it over. The book was small enough to fit in James's palm. Its pages were filled with dots and dashes, Morse code, but with subtle variations that made no sense. It's encoded, Harold explained. We used a special cipher back then. Military grade. The kind that kept secrets during both world wars. He tapped the book. Every message that passed through my office about the tunnels, I copied here. You knew about them? Knew enough to keep quiet. Your grandfather... Harold glanced around, lowering his voice. He found something down there, something that scared him bad enough to run. But before he left, he sent one last message. I've kept it memorized all these years. The old man closed his eyes, reciting from memory. Network compromised. Central breach imminent. Artifact secure, but awakening. Protocol 7 initiated. God, help us all. James opened the telegraph book, finding the message on its final page. What's Protocol 7? Don't know. But after that, things happened. Power outages across the county, strange lights in the hills, military vehicles on back roads. Then your grandfather returned and everything went quiet. Harold's eyes opened, surprisingly clear. Until now, the dog's ears perked up suddenly. Down the hall, voices approached. Back door, Harold said urgently. through the garden, and James, the cipher key is in your grandfather's watch, the one that stopped at 4:17. James hurried through the facility's garden, the telegraph book secure in his jacket. As he reached his truck, he saw two men in suits entering Cedar Grove's front door. The dog led him to an old logging trail that wound into the hills. They drove in silence, while James processed Harold's revelations. Finally, he pulled over and took out his grandfather's pocket watch. The time frozen on its face, 4:17, had always seemed random, but now he studied it differently. The watch's rear panel was engraved with what looked like decorative scrollwork, but matching it against the telegraph book's pages revealed something else, a cipher key. Clever, James muttered, beginning to decode the first message. Hide the key in plain sight all these years. The dog watched as he worked. Pages spread across the truck's hood. Slowly, the messages took shape. Coordinates, equipment lists, personnel movements, and references to something called the Archive, a secure facility deep within the tunnel network. One decoded message caught his eye. Archive content stirring, power readings unstable. Chen family reports similar anomalies. At all major nodes, the artifact may be awakening ahead of schedule. The date was June 15th, 1973, 2 days before his grandfather disappeared. Another message from the day of his return. Protocol 7 successful. Archive content stabilized. Artifact dormant but requires constant monitoring. New security measures in place. The next generation must be prepared. James looked at the dog, understanding dawning. That's why you found me. The artifact's awakening again, isn't it? The dog's eyes seemed to hold ancient knowledge as it gazed back at him. A distant rumble drew their attention. Storm clouds gathered unnaturally fast over the hills, where James knew the tunnels ran deepest. The mason's compass in his pocket grew warm, its arrows spinning wildly. Something was stirring in the depths beneath Millbrook, something his grandfather had helped contain 50 years ago. Now it was James's turn to face whatever truth lay hidden in the archive. He just hoped he was ready for what he'd find. The storm broke suddenly, sheets of rain reducing visibility to mere feet. James was forced to pull over at an abandoned gas station, its weathered sign creaking in the wind. The dog grew restless, pacing the truck's cabin. Lightning flashed, and in that brief illumination, James saw them. 3 black SUVs approaching from both directions on the rural road. They moved with purpose, boxing him in. Time to move, he told the dog, but it was already jumping out into the rain. They barely made it to the station's back door before the vehicles surrounded the building. The dog led him to a storage room. Just as flashlight beams cut through the front windows, James crouched in the darkness, listening to multiple sets of footsteps entering the station. The dog pressed against him, silent but alert. In his pocket, the mason's compass grew warm, its arrows spinning frantically. "Mr. Miller," a woman's voice, calm and professional. "We know you're here. We need to talk." Another flash of lightning revealed something scratched into the storage room's concrete floor, the same symbols from the underground door. The dog pawed at them insistently. James ran his fingers along the marks, finding a small depression. When he pressed it, a floor shifted silently inward, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. "The whole county," he whispered, remembering Harold's words. "They really are everywhere." Footsteps approached the storage room. James and the dog slipped into the opening just as the door began to open. The passage sealed above them, leaving them in perfect darkness, broken only by James's flashlight. They followed the tunnel for several minutes before emerging into a small chamber. Unlike the maintenance tunnels, this room felt older, its walls hewn from raw stone. At its center stood a pedestal bearing a heavy bronze disc, a seal nearly identical to the one from James's door. But this seal was broken, its surface split by what looked like tremendous force applied from below. Around its edges, James recognized Howard Chen's handwriting, Second seal compromised. Containment protocols failing. The archive's influence grows stronger. God forgive us, but we cannot hold it back much longer. The date was last week. James's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Get out now. They've breached the Historical Society's archives. Everything about the seals is gone. Above, muffled voices filtered through the ceiling. They were searching systematically, likely with equipment that could detect the tunnels. The dog growled softly, staring at the broken seal. As James studied it, he noticed other marks around the break, precise tool marks, as if someone had deliberately weakened it. This wasn't an accident, he realized. Someone wanted it to fail. His phone buzzed again, a number he didn't recognize. Your grandfather understood the cost of interference. The archive must remain sealed. Walk away now, or share his fate. The Mason's compass spun faster, its surface growing hot enough that James had to shift it to another pocket. The dog's hackles rose as a low vibration began to emanate from the broken seal. Then Sarah's final message. Howard's journal mentions a failsafe. 4 seals must remain intact or the archive breaks free. 3 are now compromised. You're the only one who can prevent the 4th from failing. Find me at the old mill. Hurry. James photographed the broken seal and the markings around it. Whatever was happening, whatever force the archive contained, someone was deliberately weakening its bonds. And they were willing to threaten or eliminate anyone who got in their way. The dog led him to another tunnel entrance, this one sloping upward. As they climbed, James heard vehicles starting above, moving out to continue their search. But he knew now that the real threat wasn't the people hunting him. It was whatever they were trying to unleash. The tunnel emerged in an abandoned barn half a mile from the gas station. Rain still pounded outside, but the unnatural storm was moving east, toward the hills where Sarah waited, toward the old mill and whatever answers it held about the archive's true nature. James checked his grandfather's watch. 4:17, always 4:17. Whatever had happened 50 years ago, history was about to repeat itself, and this time James would have to face it alone. The old mill loomed against the stormy sky, its abandoned water wheel creaking in the swollen creek. James parked behind it, out of sight from the main road. The dog was already out, moving purposefully toward the mill's weathered door. Sarah waited inside, surrounded by stacks of documents. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. They took everything from the Historical Society, she said without preamble. But they didn't know about this place, Howard Chen's private archive. The room was a historian's treasure trove. Maps, photographs, and documents covered every surface. But Sarah led them straight to a massive leather-bound volume on a reading desk. The chemical ledger, she said, Howard's real record of what's beneath Millbrook. The book's pages were filled with precise chemical formulas, energy readings, and detailed observations. James recognized Howard's handwriting, but the terminology was far beyond anything he'd expected. This isn't about hidden tunnels or secret societies, is it? He asked. Sarah shook her head. The tunnels were built to contain something that was never supposed to be found. She turned to a page marked with a red ribbon. A diagram showed concentric circles, the same pattern as the underground door, but labeled with terms like quantum containment and temporal stabilization. In 1872, a geological survey team discovered an anomaly deep beneath Millbrook. A perfectly spherical chamber, impossibly smooth, filled with something, energy readings off the charts, technology that shouldn't have existed for another century. The dog whined softly, pressing against James's leg. They called it the archive, Sarah continued. Not because it stored information, but because it contained something older than human history. Something that changed things around it, changed people who got too close. James studied the chemical formulas. These are containment protocols. The seals were designed to contain its influence. The tunnels are actually a massive containment system, built using principles they couldn't have understood in 1872. She turned more pages, revealing increasingly complex diagrams. Howard believed the archive was trying to communicate, or maybe wake up. Thunder cracked overhead as James reached the ledger's final entries, dated just months ago. Energy readings match 1973 levels, archive activity increasing exponentially. Quantum signatures suggest consciousness. It knows we're here. It's been waiting. Chen family protocols failing, containment degrading. The old families can no longer maintain the seals alone. God help us all if it breaks free. A loose page fell from the ledger, a letter in James's grandfather's handwriting, dated during his disappearance. Howard, the archive showed me things. Impossible things. Future and past all at once. We can't let them access it. The power is too great. I've initiated Protocol 7, but it won't hold forever. When it wakes again, the next generation must be ready. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened another book. Protocol 7 was a last resort, a way to force the archive back into dormancy. But it required sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? Your grandfather gave something of himself to strengthen the seals, his connection to linear time. That's why his watch never moves past 4:17. He exists partially outside normal time now. The dog growled suddenly, staring at the door. Sarah quickly gathered key pages from the ledger. They're coming, she said, but you need to understand, the people trying to break the seals, they think they can control the archive, use its power. But your grandfather saw the truth. It's not a tool or a weapon, it's alive. And it's so far beyond our comprehension that any attempt to harness it could tear reality apart. Voices approached. Outside, the dog nosed urgently at a trapdoor partially hidden under a rug. There's a tunnel entrance here, Sarah said, helping James move the rug. It leads to the central repository. Find the fourth seal, protect it. The archive must stay contained. Come with us, James said, but she shook her head. I'll destroy the remaining documents. They can't know how much you've learned. She pressed a key into his hand. Central repository access, Howard's personal key. Now go. James and the dog descended into the tunnel as voices entered the mill above. The last thing he saw was Sarah pouring chemicals over the documents, preparing to erase any trace of the archive's true nature. The Mason's compass glowed brightly now, pointing the way with unwavering certainty. Whatever the archive was, ancient. Intelligence, alien artifact, or something even stranger, it was fully awake, and James was the only one left who could keep it from breaking free. The tunnel from the mill plunged deeper than any James had encountered before. The dog moved swiftly, navigating turns with uncanny certainty as voices echoed behind them. The Mason's compass burned in James's pocket, its arrows wild with energy. Ah! Tremor shook the passage, dislodging dust from ancient beams. The archive was active, its influence growing stronger with each broken seal. They reached a junction where modern security doors had been installed alongside Victorian-era mechanisms. One door hung open, its electronic lock destroyed. Inside, filing cabinets had been ransacked, their contents scattered. Looking for the same things we are, James muttered. The dog barked once in agreement. Among the scattered papers, a red folder caught his eye. Emergency protocols, final containment options. The cover bore Howard Chen's signature and a warning, open only if all other measures fail. James stuffed it into his jacket as footsteps approached. They ducked into a maintenance shaft, just as flashlight beams swept the junction. Control. We've got active readings, a voice crackled over radio. Subject is moving toward the central repository. Archive energy levels increasing. Understood. Remember, we need him alive. The archive has chosen him as a focal point. The dog tugged James deeper into the shaft. They emerged into a lower tunnel where the walls were lined with copper, strange symbols pulsing with faint light. James pulled out the emergency protocols, reading as they moved. If containment fails, the archive will seek a human consciousness to interface with. It has shown preference for bloodlines connected to the original seals. Warning, Direct interface with archive consciousness may result in temporal displacement, cognitive restructuring, or complete molecular dissolution. More tremors shook the tunnel. The copper symbols flared brighter. Prior attempts at controlled interface resulted in catastrophic psychic damage. Exception: 1973 incident. Subject: Miller achieved partial synchronization through Protocol 7. Current status: temporally displaced but stable. Note: second-generation bloodline connections may enable fuller integration. The dog stopped suddenly, hackles raised. Ahead, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Sheriff Mackenzie, holding a strange device that hummed with energy. "That's far enough, James." His voice was different now, accent strange and formal. "The archive has waited long enough. The seals must be broken. Tom, you don't understand what you're dealing with." "Oh, but I do. Better than you, better than your grandfather." He gestured with the device. "The archive isn't meant to be contained. It's meant to elevate us, change us, make us ready." Ready for what? The future it showed us. The potential we could achieve. His eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. "Your grandfather was a coward. He ran from its gifts. But you're already synced with its frequencies. The compass proves it," the dog growled, moving between them. Mackenzie's device whined higher. "That's not really a dog, is it?" James said, understanding finally clicking. "It's some kind of archive manifestation. A guide. A guardian construct. Semi-autonomous. Quantum projection. Old families like the Chens created them to protect bloodline candidates." Mackenzie's smile was wrong somehow. "Kill it." Armed figures emerged from side tunnels, carrying similar devices. Energy pulses shot out, but the dog moved impossibly fast, its form blurring. James used the confusion to slam the emergency protocols. Manual override button. Blast doors slammed down, cutting off their pursuers. Warning lights flashed as ancient machinery groaned to life. Containment breach. Imminent. A Victorian-era announcement system crackled. "Initiating emergency protocol Theta. All personnel evacuate immediately." The dog barked urgently, leading James toward a maintenance ladder. They climbed as klaxons blared, and the tunnel began to shake. The archive's trying to break free, James realized. All this chaos, they're not just breaking seals, they're feeding it energy, making it stronger. They emerged into a massive chamber filled with antiquated but still functioning equipment. At its center, a pillar of swirling energy pulsed behind. Protective barriers. The Mason's compass went silent. They'd reached the edge of the central repository. Somewhere below, Mackenzie was shouting orders. But James's attention was on the emergency protocol's final page, where his grandfather's handwriting warned, "The archive isn't breaking free. It's breaking through. Only a bloodline connection can seal the breach." "James, if you're reading this, I'm sorry, but now you know why it had to be our family, why it will always be our family." The dog pressed against his leg as reality itself seemed to bend around the chamber's edges. The time had come to face whatever lay at the heart of the archive, and whatever part of himself would have to be sacrificed to contain it. The central repository's outer chamber was a blend of eras. Victorian pressure gauges alongside modern monitoring equipment, steam pipes next to fiber optic cables, all of it hummed with power as reality rippled around the edges of the room. The art. Dog led James to a hidden alcove, just as voices echoed from a lower level. Inside, they found an old office preserved like a time capsule. Howard Chen's name was still visible on the desk's nameplate. A leather portfolio lay in the center of the desk, its cover embossed with the Guardian seal. Inside was a document James had been seeking since this began. The complete membership list of the Society, updated through the present day. "Guardian Bloodlines. Active Succession," read the header. "Updated quarterly. Last revision. 3 weeks. Go. The names were organized by family lines, each with notes about their roles and current status. Chen family, primary archivists, original discovery, 1872. Current, Sarah Chen, active, notes, bloodline weakening. Archive response diminishing. Miller family, seal keepers joined, 1873. Current, James Miller, uninitiated. Notes, strongest archive resonance since 1973 incident. Weber family, communications joined, 1875. Current, Harold Weber, retired. Notes, last active ciphermaster Mackenzie family, security joined, 1888. Current, Thomas Mackenzie, compromised. Notes, archive corruption detected, recommend immediate containment. The list went on, documenting dozens of families. But what caught James's eye were the recent addenda written in Sarah's careful hand. Emergency notice, archive subversion confirmed. Multiple bloodlines compromised by direct exposure. Suspect deliberate sabotage by splinter group calling themselves the Awakeners. They believe archive contact will trigger evolutionary leap in human consciousness. Warning, compromised bloodlines show signs of archive corruption. Temporal distortions increasing. Only Miller line remains pure, possibly due to 1973 Protocol 7 activation. A hidden door opened behind them. James spun, ready to run, but the figure that entered was bent with age, moving carefully with a cane. About time you got here, boy. Harold Weber smiled, looking more vital than he had at the nursing home. Your grandfather said you'd come when the time was right. The dog's tail wagged in greeting. Harold, how did you know where to find you? Boy, I've been tracking archive energy signatures since before you were born. He tapped his cane on the floor. The old tunnels are like telephone lines to those who know how to listen, and right now they're screaming. Another tremor shook the chamber. The ripples in reality grew more pronounced. The Awakeners, James said. They're trying to force contact with the archive. Fools. Harold's voice was bitter. They think they can control it, use it. But the archive isn't some genie in a bottle. It's a door, James. A door that swings both ways. And what's on the other side has been waiting a very long time to come through. He moved to the desk, pulling out a hidden drawer. Inside lay a silver pocket watch identical to James's grandfather's. Your grandfather wasn't the first to sacrifice his place in time to strengthen the seals. Every generation, one guardian pays the price, becomes unstuck so others can stay anchored. He held up his own watch. It read 4:17. The dog barked a warning. Footsteps approached. The Awakeners are coming, Harold said. But they don't understand. The archive chose your family for a reason. The Miller bloodline. You can hear it, can't you? The humming in your bones. The whispers at the edge of consciousness. James nodded slowly. Ever since finding the door, something had been building inside him. A resonance. A connection. Your grandfather showed us how to contain it temporarily, but now it needs more. A permanent solution. Harold pressed a key into James's hand. Inner chamber access. The archive is waiting for you. It's always been waiting for you. What am I supposed to do? What Millers have always done. Protect the door. Guard the threshold. He smiled sadly. The watch showed you the time. Now you'll understand why it had to stop there. The chamber shook again. In the distance, Mackenzie was shouting orders. The dog pressed against James's leg, urging him toward another door, one that would lead them deeper into the repository. Go, Harold said. I'll hold them here. Just remember, when you face it, don't fight the connection. The archive chose you because you're strong enough to contain it, to become part of it, just like your grandfather did. James gripped the key, feeling its resonance with something vast and ancient, stirring beneath the earth. The time had come to learn what really happened at 4:17. The inner door opened onto a circular chamber that seemed to exist slightly out of sync with normal space. Reality bent around its edges like light through water. In its center stood a pedestal holding a massive book bound in strange, shifting material that wasn't quite leather. The Oath Book, James breathed, recognizing it from references in Howard's journals. The dog stayed by the door, as if unable or unwilling to approach the book. Each page was inscribed with names, centuries, of guardians who had sworn themselves to the archive's protection. The ink seemed to move on the page, signatures flowing like liquid metal. James found his grandfather's name, the signature pulsing with the same temporal energy that kept his watch frozen at 4:17. Below it was a blank space, waiting. A voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. James Miller. The threshold approaches. The chamber's reality ripples intensified. In their distortions, James saw glimpses of other times, other places. The archive was reaching out, trying to communicate. "You must choose," the voice continued. It reminded James of his grandfather, but also of Howard Chen, Harold Weber, and others he'd never met. The collective voice of all past guardians. The seals weaken. The door threatens to open both ways. What happens if it does? Images flashed through his mind. Impossible geometries, civilizations rising and falling in moments. Reality itself, twisting into new forms. The awakener's vision of evolutionary transformation. Chaos, the voice said. Change without control. Power without wisdom. The end of what you know as time. Another tremor shook the chamber. Through the reality distortions, James saw Mackenzie and his followers fighting past Harold's defenses. They were running out of time. "Your grandfather chose to sacrifice his place in time's flow to strengthen the seals," the voice explained. "But temporary measures are no longer enough. The archive requires a deeper connection, a permanent guardian." The Oath Book's pages turned, by themselves revealing a final passage. The archive must be contained, but not through force. It requires understanding, acceptance, synchronization. The chosen guardian must become one with its power, neither containing nor contained, but forming a living seal between realities. James thought of his grandfather's watch, its hands forever frozen. "If I do this, I'll stop existing in normal time. You will exist in all times and none. Become the threshold itself, the consciousness that guards the door." Through the chambers. Distortions, James saw the consequences of refusal. The awakeners breaking through, reality fracturing as the archive's power poured into unprepared minds. Civilization destroying itself in a cascade of uncontrolled evolution. He saw the dog watching. Him, the guardian construct that had led him here, knowing his bloodline's potential. Knowing this moment would come. "The choice must be made freely," the voice said, "as all true guardians have chosen." James touched his grandfather's watch, feeling its resonance with the power filling the chamber. He understood now. The watch hadn't stopped at 4:17. It had synchronized with something larger than time itself. The Oath Book's blank page waited. Above him, reality continued to bend and twist as the archive's influence grew stronger. Mackenzie's followers were getting closer, their corrupted minds driving them to break the final seals. James Miller, farmer, son of the soil, last of his bloodline, faced the choice that had been waiting for him since 1873. He could run, like the awakeners claimed his grandfather had run. Or he could become something else, something more than human, but less than normal, a living seal between worlds. The dog, the guardian construct that had chosen him, pressed against his leg one final time. Its form was blurring now, becoming pure energy, ready to merge with his consciousness when he made his choice. James opened his grandfather's watch. The hands still pointed to 4:17, but now he saw the truth. It wasn't a moment frozen in time. It was the moment time itself changed. He reached for the Oath Book's pen, its metal warm with archive energy. Above, Mackenzie's followers breached the outer defenses. The threshold between realities grew dangerously thin. Time to choose. The moment James's signature touched the Oath Book's page, Reality shuddered. The ink flowed like quicksilver, absorbing into the paper as ancient machinery groaned to life throughout the facility. But something was wrong. The connection wasn't completing. The threshold requires proper timing, the Guardian voices whispered. The convergence must be precise. A panel slid open in the chamber wall, revealing an elaborate device that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Part clock, part quantum computer, part Victorian masterwork. Its gears and crystals pulsed with archive energy. The timer device's display showed a countdown, 17 minutes until total containment failure. The Awakeners planned this, James realized. They're forcing a breach at exactly 4:17. Through the chamber's reality distortions, he saw Mackenzie's followers positioning strange devices around the facility's key points. Each one increased the temporal pressure, pushing the archive closer to breakthrough. The dog, now more energy than form, circled the timer device. Its movements left trails in reality, showing paths through time itself. James studied the device's controls. Equations and frequencies scrolled across its displays, documenting the facility's degradation. Seal 1, breached, temporal variance critical. Seal 2, breached, quantum containment failing seal. 3, breached, reality anchor destabilizing seal. 4, active, integrity at 31% and falling. Below these readings, a final note flashed. Warning, archive manifestation imminent. Recommended action, Protocol 7. It's not just about stopping them, James said, understanding flowing through him. It's about timing the convergence perfectly, using their own breach attempt to seal it permanently. He began adjusting the device's controls, remembering fragments. From Howard's journals, his grandfather's notes, Harold's warnings. The archive's energy responded, reality ripples shifting in new patterns. Intruder alert, an automated system announced. Multiple breaches detected. Archive containment at critical levels. Through the temporal distortions, James saw Mackenzie, leading his people closer. Their eyes glowed with archive corruption, bodies slightly out of phase with normal space-time. "You can't stop evolution, Miller," Mackenzie's voice echoed strangely. "The archive will transform us all." The timer device's countdown continued. 12 minutes remaining. James's fingers flew over the controls, initiating containment sequences. The dog's energy form assisted, its consciousness merging partially with the machinery. Together, they began weaving a new kind of seal, one made of consciousness and choice rather than mere physical barriers. Multiple temporal signatures detected, the device warned. Convergence point approaching. Through the facility's distortions, James saw other moments in time. His grandfather initiating the first Protocol 7, Howard Chen discovering the archive's nature, the original Guardians building their containment system, all converging on this moment. Alert, archive breach in sectors 7 through 12. Containment failure cascading, 9 minutes remaining. James felt the archive's vast consciousness pressing against reality's edges, drawn by the Awakener's devices. But where they saw only power to be harnessed, he sensed something else. A pattern, a purpose, a plan that had been waiting for generations. The dog's energy merged further with the timer device, showing James the truth. The archive hadn't been trying to break free. It had been waiting for the right guardian, the right moment, the right convergence of bloodlines, and time to complete its true transformation. "We have to let them think they're winning," James told the dog. "Let them breach the outer barriers. Channel the energy into the new seal. 7 minutes remaining." Reality buckled as Mackenzie's followers breached the chamber's outer defenses. Their devices poured power into the archive, trying to force it fully into their world. But James and the dog were ready, using the timer device to redirect that energy, weaving it into something new. Through the temporal chaos, James saw Sarah Chen and Harold Weber leading others to safety, protecting the unconscious forms of Awakeners whose minds couldn't handle the archive's power. The old Guardians doing their duty one final time. 4 minutes, 17 seconds remained. The dog's consciousness merged fully with the timer device as James made the final adjustments. Everything that had happened, the dog finding him, the compass guiding him, the battles and revelations, had led to this precise moment, time to show the Awakeners what evolution really meant. Reality fractured like broken glass as Mackenzie's followers poured into the chamber. Their devices hummed with stolen archive energy, creating ripples in space-time that distorted their movements. Behind them, the timer device counted down the final minutes to convergence. "It's over, Miller." Mackenzie's voice echoed from multiple points in time simultaneously. "The archive will be free." But James barely heard him. His attention was fixed on something that had appeared in the center of the temporal chaos, a crystalline key floating in a column of pure archive energy. The master key mentioned in Howard's earliest journals as the archive's heart. The dog's energy form swirled around it, showing James the truth. This was what the Awakeners had been searching for, the key to total archive control. But they didn't understand its true purpose. "The final key," the Guardian voices whispered, "the bridge between realities." James reached for it, just as Mackenzie fired his energy weapon. Time slowed. In that stretched moment, James saw everything. The facility's original construction. Howard. Chen discovering the archive's first pulse of power. His grandfather facing this same choice, choosing partial synchronization to buy time for the next generation. Sarah protecting the records, Harold maintaining the codes, all the Guardians playing their parts across decades. The master key pulsed in sync with his grandfather's watch. 4:17. Not just a time, but a frequency, a quantum resonance that could lock reality into new patterns. "You don't understand what you're unleashing," James told Mackenzie. "The archive isn't just power, it's change itself. That's exactly what we want." Mackenzie's followers raised their devices, pouring more energy into the chamber. "Humanity needs to evolve." "Not like this," James said. "Not without choice." He gripped the master key as the dog's energy merged with it. Suddenly he could see the facility as it truly was, not just tunnels and machines, but a vast pattern of space-time, folded and layered by generations of Guardians. And at its heart, the archive itself, an intelligence so vast it experienced all moments simultaneously. The timer device read 3 minutes remaining. Mackenzie fired again, but reality bent around James, guided by the master key's power. "Your grandfather was weak," Mackenzie snarled. "He ran from transcendence." "No," James said, understanding flowing through him. "He sacrificed everything to protect the archive's true purpose. And now I know why." The dog's consciousness, fully, merged with the archive's energy, showed him the pattern. The master key wasn't meant to control the archive. It was meant to complete it, to transform its raw power into something humanity could safely navigate. 2 minutes remaining. James raised the key as Mackenzie's followers unleashed everything they had. Archive energy exploded through the chamber, reality rippling like water. But where the Awakeners tried to force the power outward, James and the key drew it in, containing and redirecting. Through the temporal distortions, he saw other battles being fought. Sarah and Harold leading a group of loyal Guardians to secure the outer chambers, his grandfather in 1973, buying time for this very moment. Howard Chen, writing his final warning, knowing it would reach the right hands. 1 minute remaining. "You're too late," Mackenzie laughed as his devices reached full power. "The archive is breaking free." But James smiled, feeling the resonance build. "No, it's becoming what it was always meant to be." The master key pulsed with his grandfather's frequency. 4:17. The dog's energy swirled faster, merging with both key and archive. Reality itself began to shift, not chaotically as the Awakeners intended, but with purpose and pattern. 30 seconds. Mackenzie realized too late what was happening. "No, The power is meant for us. The power was never meant to be taken, James said. Only transformed. The timer device's countdown aligned with his grandfather's watch. The master key burned with archive energy as all timelines converged on this singular moment. Through the chaos, James saw the truth the Awakeners had missed. The archive hadn't been imprisoned by the Guardians. It had been waiting, growing, preparing for the right convergence of bloodlines and time to complete its metamorphosis. And as the timer device's final seconds ticked away, James Miller, farmer, son of the soil, chosen guardian, prepared to help it become something entirely new. The master key pulsed one final time as reality bent toward its new configuration. Time to show everyone what real evolution looked like. As the master key aligned with the archive's energy, reality shifted one final time. The chamber's walls dissolved, replaced by projections of memory and time. James found himself surrounded by floating screens, the archive's video records, playing out the true history of everything that had led to this moment. 72. Howard Chen discovering the first pulse of archive energy, watching in awe as it projected visions of humanity's potential futures. Not just technological advancement, but consciousness evolution. Humanity learning to exist in multiple dimensions of time and space. 3. The first Guardians. Realizing the archive wasn't just a source of power, but a seed of transformation planted by some far future version of humanity. A blueprint for controlled evolution, waiting for the right conditions to activate. 73. His grandfather facing the archive's first attempted emergence, choosing partial synchronization through Protocol 7. The record showed what really happened. At 4:17, the moment Robert Miller merged with enough archive energy to create a temporal anchor, buying time for the next generation. You see now? The Guardian voices spoke through the records. Why it had to be your family. The Miller bloodline had been chosen not for power, but for stability. The ability to maintain consciousness across multiple time streams without losing connection to humanity's present state. Mackenzie and his followers watched in horror as the records revealed their own corruption. The archive's energy had twisted, their understanding making them see only the power, not its purpose. "We were wrong," one of Mackenzie's followers whispered, his temporal distortions fading as the truth broke through the archive's influence. The records shifted to more recent events, Sarah protecting the knowledge, Harold maintaining the old ways, the dog's quantum consciousness choosing James as the final guardian. All part of the archive's pattern, building toward this convergence. Then the records showed something unexpected. The future, multiple possible timelines spiraling out from this moment. In some, the Awakeners succeeded, releasing raw archive power that shattered human consciousness. In others, the archive remained sealed, its evolutionary potential forever locked away. But in one timeline, marked by the resonance of 417, something new emerged. The records showed humanity learning to navigate time like space, evolving not through force, but through understanding, through choice. This was never about control, James said, understanding at last. It was about preparation, getting us ready for the next step. The master key pulsed in agreement as the records revealed their final truth. The archive wasn't a weapon or a tool, but a chrysalis, a quantum space where humanity could safely transform, guided by those who understood the importance of maintaining connection to their original nature. That's why it needed the Guardians, why it needed the Miller bloodline. Someone had to maintain the bridge between what humanity was and what it could become. The timer device showed less than a minute remaining, but time had become fluid in the chamber. The dog's energy merged with the records themselves, showing James the final piece. His grandfather hadn't failed in 1973. He'd created the first stable time loop, establishing the 417 resonance that would allow for controlled transformation. Now, it was James's turn to complete the pattern. Mackenzie watched the records with tears in his eyes, his temporal corruption fading. All this time, we thought we were the next step in evolution. You were right about evolution, James told him, just wrong about how it needed to happen. The records showed the truth about the dog as well, a quantum construct created by the first Guardians, programmed to find the right consciousness at the right moment. It had been watching the Miller family for generations, waiting for someone who could fully sync with the archive without losing their humanity. As the final seconds approached, the records merged into a single stream of light. The master key resonated with his grandfather's watch as all timelines converged on this moment of choice. Through the records, James saw Sarah and Harold securing the outer chambers, protecting the unconscious forms of those whose minds couldn't handle the archive's revelation. He saw his grandfather smiling across time, understanding flowing between them. The dog's energy swirled one last time, merging with both the records and the key. Everything that had happened, every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of preparation had led to this. Time to begin humanity's real evolution, not through force, but through understanding, not through power, but through connection, not through breaking reality, but through learning to dance with it. The timer device's final seconds ticked away as James Miller prepared to complete the pattern his grandfather had begun at 417, transforming the archive from a source of power into a bridge between what was and what could be. The chamber erupted in pure archive energy as the timer device hit zero. Reality bent and folded around them as 417 synchronized across all timelines. The master key blazed in James's hands, trying to complete its connection with the archives. Core consciousness, but something was blocking it. Mackenzie, his mind still partially corrupted by archive energy, made one final desperate attempt to seize control. "If we can't have the power," he snarled, his form flickering between time streams, "no one will." His remaining followers activated their devices at full capacity, trying to overload the archive's containment. The chamber's reality barriers began to crack. Through the fractures, James glimpsed the void between dimensions, the raw chaos the archive had been protecting humanity from until they were ready to navigate it. "James Miller," the Guardian voices spoke with urgent clarity. "The final seal requires proof of worthiness. The medal must be earned." A golden light materialized in the center of the temporal storm. The Guardian's medal, a simple bronze disc, marked with the same symbols as the underground door. But unlike every other artifact James had encountered, this one wasn't ancient. It was being forged right now, in this moment, from the essence of his choice. The dog's energy surged toward it, showing him what to do. The medal wasn't just a symbol, it was a key component of the archive's transformation, focusing the convergence of blood, time, and choice. "The worthiness is not in the taking," the voices whispered, "but in the giving." James understood. Even as Mackenzie's energy beams tore at the chamber's fabric, he reached out, not to grab the medal, but to offer what the archive truly needed: his connection to normal time, his place in the linear flow of reality, the same sacrifice his grandfather had made, but taken to its final evolution. The medal responded, its surface flowing like liquid metal. The dog's quantum consciousness merged with it, becoming a conduit between James's human awareness and the archive's multidimensional existence. "No!" Mackenzie fired everything he had at James. "The power is meant to elevate us." "That was never the point," James said as the medal's energy flowed through him. "Evolution isn't about rising above our humanity. It's about expanding it, growing into something greater while remembering where we came from." The medal pulsed with his grandfather's. Frequency 417, not just a time, but a quantum key. the resonance that would let humanity take its next step without losing its soul. Through the temporal chaos, James saw Sarah and Harold leading the other Guardians in a desperate holding action, keeping the outer chambers secure while the transformation completed. He saw his grandfather across time, maintaining the original Protocol 7 seal. He saw Howard Chen writing his final warning, knowing it would reach the right consciousness at the right moment. The medal blazed brighter as James accepted its full meaning. The Guardian's role wasn't to control the Archive's power, but to preserve humanity's connection to itself through the coming evolution, to be an anchor in the storm of transformation. Mackenzie's followers began to fall back as the medal's true power manifested. Their temporal corruption couldn't withstand the resonance of genuine evolution. One by one, their devices overloaded and failed. "What's happening to me?" Mackenzie's form started to stabilize, the Archive's corrupting influence burning away in the medal's light. "You're remembering who you are," James told him. "We all are." The dog's energy swirled one final time, completing its mission. It had found the right Guardian at the right moment, someone who understood that real power lay not in force, but in connection, not in rising above humanity, but in helping it grow. The medal, the key, and the Archive's consciousness aligned perfectly at 417. James felt his grandfather's presence across time, their shared Miller bloodline forming the bridge between what humanity was and what it could become. Reality itself held its breath as James made the final choice. Not for power or glory, but for the hard, necessary work of guiding humanity through its next great transformation. The Guardian's medal merged with his consciousness as space and time began to reshape themselves. The Archive's true purpose was finally ready to be fulfilled. Time to show everyone what evolution really meant. 1 month after the transformation, Sarah Chen stood in the Miller farmhouse kitchen watching James sign the final document. The deed transfer was more than just a property record. It was the last piece of the Archive's new configuration. "You're sure about this?" she asked. James smiled, his form slightly fluid now, existing in multiple moments at once while remaining anchored to human time. The Guardian's medal gleamed at his throat, helping him maintain the balance between dimensions. "The farm needs a physical caretaker," he said, "someone to maintain the surface while I maintain what's below." The transfer deed bore both mundane legal language and subtle Archive symbols, officially passing the Miller farm's surface operations to Mackenzie's daughter, Katie. She had shown a natural resistance to Archive corruption and a deep understanding of the balance required for true evolution. "The old boundaries don't apply anymore," James continued. "The Archive isn't just underground now. It's everywhere, threading through reality like mycelium through soil. We need new kinds of Guardians for new kinds of growth." Sarah nodded, understanding. The transformation had changed everything, but not in the way the Awakeners had imagined. Instead of raw power unleashed, humanity had gained the capacity for controlled evolution. The ability to explore higher dimensions while maintaining their connection to their original nature. The dog, or rather its quantum consciousness, had dispersed throughout the Archive's new matrix. Its Guardian programming now helped stabilize the transformed reality, guiding others as it had once guided James. Through the kitchen window, they could see Katie working in the south field. Like her father, she had survived the Archive's transformation. Unlike him, she had emerged with a clear understanding of the balance required. The deed transfer would make her the first of a new kind of Guardian, one who maintained humanity's connection to the earth while others explored the stars. "Your grandfather would be proud," Sarah said softly. James touched his pocket watch, which now read all times simultaneously while remaining fixed at 417. "He knows. In the new timeline, all moments connect." The deed transfer completed, its symbols briefly glowing with Archive energy. In the field, Katie looked up as if sensing the change. Her eyes met James's across the distance, acknowledging their shared responsibility. Mackenzie himself was recovering slowly in the hospital, his mind gradually healing from archive corruption. But his daughter had already proven herself the better. Guardian, understanding instinctively what he had fought so hard against, that evolution required both growth and roots. James could feel the archive's consciousness threaded through reality, no longer contained, but transformed. Through the Guardian's medal, he sensed others beginning to awaken to their expanded potential, not through force or artificial acceleration, but through natural development, guided by those who understood the importance of maintaining human connection. There will be others who try to force it, Sarah warned, who want to rush the evolution. That's why we're here. James gestured to the deed transfer, to maintain the balance, to show them that real transformation doesn't mean leaving your humanity behind. It means growing into something greater while remembering where you came from. He felt his grandfather's presence across time, maintaining the original Protocol 7 seal that had made this moment possible. The Miller bloodline would continue its work, not through inheritance now, but through choice and understanding. Katie approached the house, ready to take up her new role. In her, James saw the future of the Guardians, not secret societies hiding, underground, but open guides helping humanity navigate its expanding consciousness. The deed transfer was just the beginning. The archive, transformed and distributed throughout reality, would need many kinds of Guardians to help humanity grow into its new potential. Some, like James, would help stabilize the higher dimensions. Others, like Katie, would maintain the connections to humanity's roots. Together, they would ensure that evolution happened naturally, safely, guided by those who understood that true growth required both the courage to advance and the wisdom to remember. The farm would continue, its fields growing food for bodies, while the transformed archive grew humanity's consciousness, old boundaries giving way to new understanding. The perfect balance of earth and stars. Time to begin the real work of becoming more than they were, while remembering everything they had been. The transformation was complete. The true evolution could begin.